All right. As I said just a moment ago, I warned you all. Today's a doozy of a story, and I'm not gonna pretend like it's not. Let's talk about Tamar, Ammon, and Absalom. But before we do that, I'm going to rewind us quickly to remember what happened last week. We talked about David and Bathsheba and David behaving badly, thinking he gets away with it when he sends Uriah out to be killed on the battlefield. Nathan comes as a prophet, kind of corners David, talks to him about it, and then there is a judgment given of what David's punishment for his misgivings are. So, is anyone willing to read for me 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 11?
I can do that.
All right.
Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun.
All right.
For you did it secretly. But
Uh-huh.
Uh,
So that's our introduction for today. We're getting the first part of that punishment today of I will raise up trouble in your own house.
Mhm.
mhm.
So with that, I'm I'm going to throw it to you all because I know there's a lot of emotions that go with this text. It is considered one of the text of terror. That's a name given to texts that specifically are both horrific, but also particularly horrific for the women involved.
Mm.
So, what are some of your reactions reading this story today of the rape of Tamar? Yeah, Clay.
Well, she offers him a solution
Hmm.
that would be fine for everyone. She said, don't do this folly. Um, Speak to the king, because at that time you could still marry a half sister. So, just make this legal and we don't have to, go, none of this would have happened probably.
So there's some placations and some flagrant abuse of power and ignoring of rules.
Yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
all could have been avoided.
Other initial reactions?
Well, there's certainly a great lack of empathy here. Once Amnon is done with her, then he suddenly loathes her, whereas before he could barely contain himself for wanting her. I mean, the switch in emotions just seems,
Mhm.
sort of unbelievable.
So we'll talk about the switch in emotions because there's actually that is one thing that there's one part of this that's been written about a lot is like what's going on here.
Mhm.
And it turns out there's a lot of psychology that goes behind that piece that we'll
Okay,
dive into.
okay.
Like he's disgusted with himself, so he puts it on her.
Hold on to that thought. Yeah, Gretchen?
Well, it um I didn't go to back to the Levitical text or anything, but I thought that the half sister and sister and all of that was sort of an interesting. She was his half sister, but she wasn't really his sister, but she was. And I didn't quite know how to react to all that, and it was very disturbing, frankly. I mean, it was just disgusting, but
Mhm.
I didn't know what the real law
Yeah. So we can
says.
talk about the laws because there's a few that is the other position where we're kind of used to royalty marrying royalty. There is Levitical law about this, and there's a few things that could be happening. So we'll touch on that as well. You all are picking up a lot of the high points, which is good.
I'd like to know more about Amnon's background, what made him the way he was, and why he was so terrible. And what would cause something like that in a person?
Yeah. We're not given too much,
Lust.
but there are some hints.
Yeah.
And it's a very contemporary story, isn't it?
Hmm. There are some things that sadly never change. And this is one of the sad ones where this still happens.
Yeah, God's angry at David, so he uses women get punished.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting,
Yeah, well, Tamar is a woman,
right?
and
Huh.
and then she is not only raped, but then she is discarded.
Hmm. Yeah. So I mean that is an interesting take of seeing who is the collateral damage, who is being punished, and who is collateral damage to punishment. Because who being corrected in a way is still means that you are in some ways the main character of the story. A parent is willing to punish a child to give correction and guidance, and then there's other people who are just the collateral for the main character's self-improvement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was also interesting that it eventually led to Solomon becoming king.
It will, yes. All right. So to get to before we dive directly into the text, I do want to take a moment to look at the family tree real quick, because I find this to be very helpful to kind of sort out some of the puzzle pieces of what's happening. So this was the most legible family tree that I could find. There's some that have a lot more detail in it, but this is very clearly delineated. So David has 11 brothers, but he is the son of Jesse. And then David has his series of wives. Michal is, if you remember, the daughter of Solomon, his first wife. She actually has a child with her second husband, but has no royal children with David. So she is kind of an exception where she does have a son, it's just not with David. Similar with Abigail. Abigail is the wife that David picks up when he's on the run. She is the widow of Nabal, so she has children with Nabal, and I believe there is a later child with her as well, but not really in the royal standing that we're going to get to. So that brings us to this wife that I'm not going to try to pronounce her name yet, who I believe is one of the wives David picks up along the way, and she gives birth to his firstborn son, Amnon. So Amnon is the eldest. He is the one who, by birthright, would inherit the dynasty. He is the one being groomed to be king. And I think that, in a way, informs some of his actions and assumptions in the world because he is the firstborn of David, set to be king.
It's good to be the king. So,
Yeah, and second in line to be the king.
yeah.
So then we have Michal, one of David's other wives, which then gives birth to Absalom and Tamar. These are two of the characters for today. So notably, Absalom is number 2 in line for the king. So his elder brother is the only person ahead of him, and these two are full siblings, where Amnon is a half sibling. You then have a few other wives with single sons, or each having a son. This is later on in the story when they talk about, oh no, Absalom attacked all the sons. This is the group they're talking about. So David has many more sons. They are all kind of half brothers. There is 10 concubines that will come up later. They are not given, they don't have royal children, but they are technically in the list of wives. And then behind the 10 concubines, you have Bathsheba, who is with Uriah, but Uriah doesn't have any children with Bathsheba, but Bathsheba will give birth to Solomon. And a few others. Solomon does have younger brothers, but they don't really come into the picture.
And
So
I would say that you could go even farther back with this tree. You would go back to Boaz, wouldn't you?
yes, that I
Is
would.
is Jesse the son of Boaz, or is it go farther? It goes farther than
This is
that.
one where I would double check the Gospels lineage and
Oh,
the Hebrew text lineage. So by the
yeah.
Gospels, yes, Jesse is either the child or grandchild of Ruth and Boaz. But I would that the person writing that lineage had an agenda. So I won't confirm or deny that by the Hebrews uh reckoning of it. Yeah, Larry?
So Amnon was born before Solomon?
Yes.
Okay.
Solomon, at the time of his birth is the baby brother. Um,
Okay. All
these
right.
these three are I don't know if the child that Bathsheba gives birth to initially that dies is given a name, but Solomon does have younger brothers, so it does make him kind of in the middle of the lineup. But at the
Mhm.
time, like Dave or Solomon is, let's see, one, two, three, four, five, like number 6 in line for
Okay.
the throne.
Okay.
He is not the expected king.
King. Okay.
He's the son that you send off to Rome to be a clergy person to help get influence with the Pope.
Yeah.
I mean, that's anachronistic, but you all get my point.
Right.
All right. So with that, let's talk about the scripture itself. We get some time passed, which just means like an indefinite time. Sometime, once upon a time, David had a son named Absalom who had a beautiful sister named Tamar. So that is our introduction to these two. And the key problem here is Absalom is just absolutely besotted with his half sister.
Amnon.
Amon.
Oh, Amnon. I'm sorry. Amnon is. Woo! Amnon is. And I don't know how it's translated with you all, but my text is translated to say he was in love with her.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that while that is probably accurate to the words that are given, I don't think that is an accurate understanding of Amnon's feelings towards his half sister. So, if you were to describe this differently, how would you say how would you describe his feelings towards his half sister? Yeah, Larry?
Well, later in the text, when he decides to discard her, he says that his feelings of distaste were stronger than his feelings of lust
Mhm.
for her before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not love, it's lust.
Ah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And that
he
seems
lusted after her.
something that seems to have afflicted every male in the Bible.
Uh-huh.
They've all got 10 wives and 20 concubines.
Mm-hmm. So other ways to describe what Absalom is feeling? I keep
I'm
saying
not,
Absalom, my apologies. Amnon is feeling. Is it
Well,
just
I
lust?
think it's a sense of entitlement.
yeah.
Say more. Why entitlement?
Well, I mean, he's the oldest, and it's why not? He can have whatever he wants, and he wants. I mean, Tamar must be she's a beauty,
Mm-hmm.
and she's handy, and he's seeing her, and
Mhm.
he says, "Oh gosh, I'd like her," and so it's just kind of like, well, I ought to be able to have her.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But
Entitlement. That's a good
also
word.
is at the beginning, you
The
know,
con the concept of love seems to be very different from or even lust. It's we think of something different. We think of something ongoing,
Mm-hmm.
and there seems to be more. Just your eyes are involved.
He seems to be the kind of person that doesn't care about the feelings of other people. He only cares about himself. He's very self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Which is why I don't like the term love, because in a sense love is selfless, where this is not this is a selfish love
Yeah, right, right.
that sounds like it's nearing on obsession.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why we actually have a very good word in English to describe this feeling. Are you all familiar with the term limerence?
No.
What?
Limerence.
Limerence.
Is that a verb?
Here we go.
Sounds like a noun.
Limerence is the state of mind resulting from romantic feelings for another person. The state involves intrusive, melancholic thoughts or tragic concerns. It is often related to like obsessive thinking. So the argument is, quote, love at first sight is not actually love, because love is, we want to put that more in like an active verb kind of steady sense. Limerence is that like initial feeling of like you met someone, you're really attracted to them, you can't stop thinking of them. That is the term that is actually considered limerence, not love.
Huh. I never heard of that.
It's
Put that down on my list. I'll see how I can use that today.
Yeah. So it's associated with love madness, infatuation, once again, as obsessive elements or love sickness.
And today we would see it related to stalking, I think.
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. If Amnon wasn't the king's son, he would be a stalker. Or
yeah.
Yeah.
It also seems to be associated with some physical feelings other than the emotional attachment. In other words, it makes the person exhibiting limerence feel bad.
yeah.
Yeah, he feels sick or he feels something isn't well.
Yeah, I mean, that's often in like romantic comedies. Even let's go even back to Shakespeare. We can talk about Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
They meet and it's like the like love at first sight. No, no, no. Those two are experiencing limerence, where there's that obsessive thinking about it. And when they're apart from each other, like the world is ending. That feeling of melancholic, oh, what can I do? My Romeo is gone. I like, oh no, Juliet, what can I do? This is in peril, which leads them to terrible decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in some ways, it's not a love story, it's a limerence story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gary?
He's so infatuated with her that he's lost control of his own power of himself,
Mm-hmm.
because he's sick and he has one he's a useless blob
Mm-hmm.
around until he gets with her.
So here is one of my questions for you all is by Amnon's self-profession, like the way he describes his reaction, he is sick, he is that useless blob. He can do nothing else. Oh no. Is it true that he has lost control, or is that just an explanation? What do we all think? Yeah, Gretchen?
Well, I'm kind of not willing to let him have any kind of non-agency in this. In fact, I mean, I don't see him as sort of like the victim of this limerence. I used it today, by the way, now. He said it's more, it's his, he does it.
Yeah, yeah. He's
And,
guilty.
you could say God made him do it. I mean, because, trouble's going to come to your family, but he's guilty as charged,
Mhm,
in my opinion. I'm not gonna let him off the hook.
mhm.
I bring it up because it's a common defense that is used is an inability to control oneself
Okay.
is often used as a defense for men who continue to do this. And I think that A is actually pretty insulting to men to say, "Oh, I actually devolve into the state of an animal. I am no longer human. I have lost control." That's actually fairly insulting to the human race. I have a higher opinion of men than that.
Well, he doesn't really act like he's out of control. He seems very intentional.
And that's the other part. He is very calculated here. And so, what does a question to think about is how do we help people who are in this state of obsessive limerence? Because he has decided to be a useless blob, make it everybody's problem. Because I also think that shows a level of immaturity of I can't get what I want, so I'm gonna throw a big boy temper tantrum to the point that his friend comes in and says, "Hey, what's wrong?"
Mm.
So what do we think of his friend's advice? Because it is said that it's his friend that gives this plan.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it says his friend was a very cunning man.
Mm-hmm.
What was his motivation? Just to make a fool of him?
Well, or to become he's the best buddy of the upcoming king. He will, Amnon will owe him something.
Mm,
Mm.
mhm.
My Bible says that this Jonadab was a very crafty man.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's
Mhm.
great for him.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to say, oh, it wasn't, at the very end of the thing, it says David didn't have anything to do with this. So I guess he was trying to make it with, what's his name? It didn't have anything to do with it either. He was given the idea by somebody else.
He sounds like another very immature person, very much like Amnon, and probably would do the same thing if he had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I
I
would throw out.
don't,
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I think calculating again.
Mhm.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
immaturity. I think it's being able to take advantage of a situation and go with it and
Mhm.
do what will be advantageous to him in the future.
A little without conscience.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. Good point.
Mhm.
And I think this culture, this culture of, where you could have several women, you had all these children, it does not lead to what we would call a nice moral.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds you of anybody in the current?
So, 2 points I'll bring up here is one, I sometimes wonder if like we if God is directly punishing David or if David is reaping the consequences of how he lived his life.
Mhm.
Because David's example for how to deal with women is not a good example. And so you could see how his sons just learned from dad, hey, this is how you get what you want, because that's how David got what he wanted.
Yeah.
David said, bring Bathsheba, and she came.
Yeah.
And he actually caused the death of Bathsheba's husband, Uriah.
Yeah.
You could say he didn't literally kill Uriah, but he did kill him.
Yeah.
Right.
which was the worst part. But Bathsheba, you don't really know whether she consented or not.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say.
So the other aspect of it that I'll draw out is I could see how someone could argue that what Jonadab is saying is, quote, locker room talk, where the culture of men throwing out what they would do or what they could do in a sense of hypotheticals in that male only space. And some people have argued that, well, this is like a safe space for men, they're not meaning to act on it. But this is actually the danger of allowing locker room talk, because most people may be in agreement that, yeah, this is in jest, no one would actually do this, except for the one person who doesn't realize that they're not serious.
Yeah.
And so there are consequences for having spaces where inappropriate behavior is kind of jested about and talked about as like a, hey man, what would you do with her? Oh, here, I have a plan for Tamar. This is what I would do. You could see how in that male-centric culture, Jonadab could have just thrown out an idea and Amnon ran with it.
Right.
So that said,
Chris,
yeah, what's up?
excuse me, this at some point, and probably this is towards the end, how has this been preached?
I have,
And
I'll be honest, I've
what
never
is
heard this preached.
okay?
I don't
I mean,
think
I was
anyone wants to
wondering.
deal with it.
So, and now, how would you preach it?
Ooh.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I just,
Mhm.
this is obviously very bad toward women. And so was there a kind of preaching that said that this is what you deserve, women? Men are more powerful than you and they can do whatever they want to with you? I don't, anyway, just.
You're actually bringing me to a conversation I had with the personal trainer I go and see. He knows he is non-religious, knows I'm a pastor,
Yeah.
occasionally asks me what I preach about. And so I've talked about it, and evidently I talk about it interestingly enough that he decided to open the Bible and start reading it for the first time in his life, which I'm like, okay, sure, it's weird. And he approached me with the question the other day of, how do you know what part of this you are supposed to replicate and what part of it is just story? And that to me, like I feel like we have an instinctual, like if you grow up with this, you have your Sunday school stories, you're kind of given a roadmap of like, pay attention to this, this is just story. But Gretchen, your question in some ways is at the heart of this, is like, this is in here, is this meant to be a cautionary tale or a like, yeah, you can do this story? And it's not overly obvious when translated where this falls into, but I would argue that this is, by the Hebrew text understanding, is meant to be like a, this is abhorrent, don't do this. This is a sign that things are going wrong. I don't know how this has been preached historically. How I would preach it today is some of the points that I'm bringing up where I'm making connections to modern day culture, like the danger of locker room talk and why, if you hear this, you should stand up to it. Things like what do our sexual ethics actually look like? And I full-heartedly believe that we actually need a more nuanced sexual ethic than I know I was taught as a kid, which was just don't have sex before you're married and there's no other things given. We need a more nuanced understanding of consent and what good ethics look like, because we know this one's bad. And then the thought of like, what does justice look like? Because Tamar is avenged, but I don't think she ever got justice. So
Right.
let's keep going and hit some of those other parts because there's still a lot here, and we have a half hour left.
That's a good point, that she's avenged, but she doesn't get justice is a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes the men feel better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Well, she was discarded
Yeah.
by the writers in the same way that Amnon discarded her.
yeah,
I mean, the writers of the Bible are just as guilty of throwing her under the bus as Amnon was.
which is why you always pay attention to who's writing the story. The writers,
Mhm.
in a way, like they care about Tamar's honor. They don't care about her.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
So let's keep going. So the plan is pretend to be sick, have the king see you, and ask for your half sister to come feed you food like a little baby. He wants her to like feed him by her hand. And David doesn't seem to think anything's wrong with this. Okay, I'll have your sister come to your house. But that also implies that Amnon's old enough to have his own house. This is not a teenager.
Mhm.
This is someone who is older, at least a little bit, much more mature, probably still a young adult, but he should have control of himself. And so the plan goes into place, and she comes over, bakes him food, initially just sets it out on the table, and he's like, no, 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 come feed it to me, and sends the servants away. And then comes her state when he starts assaulting her. Her comments that we've already brought up a little bit is, my brother, don't force me to do such a thing. Like, don't. Such a thing is not done in Israel. The implication is, like, in the heathens around, like, this is what pagans do. This is what the
Mhm.
Canaanites do. This is what the Philistines do. Don't be like them. Like, are you going to debase yourself like these other ungodly people are? Where would I carry my shame? Uh, when people talk about shame, there it's both like a theoretical thing, but it's also like a body thing. Like uncovering your mother's shame would be like looking at her naked. And so shame, it don't think about it in like a modern sense of feeling ashamed. It's kind of this semi-tangible thing. Like, where would I carry myself in a way?
Mhm.
Like, where would I go where I wouldn't carry this with me? Um, would you, as for you, you would be a scoundrel of Israel. Basically, by doing this, you will be an outcast. And by him being an outcast, she would also be an outcast.
Mhm.
Therefore, I beg you, speak to the king, speak to dad, talk to the highest ruler, and he will not withhold me from you. So, we already asked the question about the legality of this by Levitical law. By both, where's my note? Here we go. By Leviticus 18:9 and 11 and Deuteronomy 27. Oh, also Leviticus 20. So this is four mentions. A man is not supposed to sleep with his sister or his mother's or his, what is that? His father's wife's daughter. You are technically not supposed to marry your sister or your half sister.
Okay.
So she's technically on the no-no list. However, I'm gonna read straight from the notes in my Bible here.
Yeah.
Unless she is lying to Amnon to buy time, this must mean that the laws are not in effect at this time, that the royal family is exempt from these laws, or that David would be willing to disregard the laws for Amnon. So it's either saying these rules, like there is a prohibition, so either David would ignore it, it's not in effect, or they kind of have like special royal rules. Yeah, Clay?
Yeah, and it was my notes that said at that time, a man could marry his half-sister, though later this practice was forbidden, Leviticus 18:9.
Hmm.
So that's why I was saying she could do this, but just let's ask the king first
Yeah.
and prevent everything else that happened. So I was going by that note that she
Mhm.
could do it.
Yeah. So,
But she didn't want to. I mean, that's the other,
so
kind
here's
of,
the thing. By her text, she's like, what she is saying is, don't assault me.
Yeah, don't do this the wrong way.
Don't do this the wrong way. It seems like is not in time. I mean, she's either buying time to kind of escape this situation because I read in my notes elsewhere, as a princess, as a virgin princess, she was highly guarded because she is valuable. She is the way that David would make trade deals. But you could see how it would not be a bad match if she got to stay with her family instead of being married to someone else. So this actually might not be a bad match. She might be okay with it. She's just like, let's not do it this way. Maybe. It depends how you read into it.
Well, in that culture, did it matter if the woman wanted to or not? I mean, maybe she didn't want to, but she probably thought, well, I've got to do it anyway if it's advised or given permission.
That's the unfortunate thing is no matter what, she wouldn't have say in her match.
Yeah.
So this is why the rules of what we understand today of consent, we have a much more empowering idea of what consent is. Consent, as a wife, she would not be able to say no. She would not be able to choose her husband. And so, like, her opinions on the matter really didn't matter. And she was probably trained from a young age to expect that.
Mhm.
So there's a sense where, unfortunately, women throughout history have had to make choices of what is the least bad decision. Yeah, Larry?
Well, it seems what she proposes is strictly for her advantage. If who's going to know? Nobody's going to know what happened except for what they say because everybody's been sent away
Mm-hmm.
from the area. So if she can get David to agree that she's going to go to the king, one, she's going to escape right
Right.
now with nothing happening.
And that's why some people look at this and say she's trying to get an escape plan, while
Yeah.
others are saying, like, she's not actually opposed. She just doesn't, she wants it done the right way.
decently and in order, I think is what Presbyterians would say.
Say that again, Gretchen?
Decently and in order is what we would say.
Right.
It also says of him, for me, where would I carry my shame? But as for you, you would be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel. At least my Bible uses that. The outrageous fools.
Mm-hmm.
My Bible says wanton fool. I like that version.
Yeah.
That's different from outrageous.
Yeah. So at any rate, Amnon is used to getting what he wants when he wants and doesn't consult the king and forces her to lie with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes the part where that we've also brought up at the beginning of he then hated her more than he loved her.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that if what he was feeling was love is really strange. And that's what strikes us weird is like if he was truly in love and infatuation with her, that would be weird. But what psychologists have studied with men who do assault women there is a sense of loathing that can come afterwards. Because if he views her as an object, she is now not a pristine object, she is soiled. And it comes from the objectification and the ruination, as if women are something to be ruined. Now she is no longer that angelic figure. It is his own doing, but now he hates her, and that is a flip that people see, specifically with men who assault women. Yeah, Gretchen?
Well, I was going to say he always saw her as an object. And yeah, I imagine that Sue has some kind of psychological definition of this, or is this a common?
Well, it's hard to know how much is a cultural thing and how much is individual psychopath. Yeah. Doesn't appear to have the kind of conscience he should. He knew the law, which is you don't lie with a virgin. And that's only because that reduces her worth as a future mate. Not because it's your sister.
Yeah, property.
So
it ruins the property, doesn't it?
In a not dissimilar way, I feel really bad because this objectifies Tamar further. But it's not a bad analogy, unfortunately, in the time, is if you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, the moment that the tires hit the asphalt and the papers are signed, it is no longer a new car. And its value drops.
Used product.
It is now used. And I have a feeling that Amnon is viewing it the same way. In some ways, he wanted the virgin princess, the beauty of the land, but then he drove her off the lot, and now she's just some girl. The value dropped, and now he hates her. And technically, also by Levitical law, if you rape a virgin, you are then supposed to marry her, and you are required to marry her and not allowed to divorce her, which is then Tamar's second statement, where she is upset that he is leaving her. In our modern sense, that is, or like, why would she want this from her rapist? But by that cultural standard, he is required to marry her and is refusing his duty to do so.
And she comments that is worse than what he did to her, sending her away. That's what struck me, was that next part.
Because now she has no prospects. So
children.
Unlike Bathsheba, who Bathsheba kind of just goes back to her house and then secretly sends a message to David that says, by the way, I'm pregnant. Tamar does the one thing she can to assert her agency. And I love this about her. She is forced out of the room and she immediately tears her robe, her long princess robes. The comment about long sleeves, one of the things that indicates, fabric is one of the most expensive things you can have. And by having long sleeves that drag the floor, it's a show of wealth. And she just rips them. And she puts ashes on her head. And once again, she is choosing to display the fact that this has happened to her. She's not keeping it secret. She's not keeping it to herself. She is displaying for all the world to see that she was defiled. So what do you think of this reaction where she decides to make it everyone's problem as well?
It's probably her only chance to do anything, because her brother then says, go hide away. Don't let anyone know. It's her only chance to show what happened.
Yeah, she's kind of outing the rapist. I mean, I don't know if she's going around saying he did it, but I think people putting two and two together. I don't know.
Tearing your clothes and putting ashes on your head are a sign of mourning. And it's a very visual sign. So people
Right.
would know, especially if no one in the royal family had died, they would be like, oh no, what happened?
Yes.
Mhm.
So theoretically, if she kept this to herself, she could have still skirted by and hoped that no one noticed and potentially still gotten married off and had a decent life. And instead, she chooses to display it.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Hmm.
She ran the risk of being blamed as like victims are blamed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. So she lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wonderful life.
So her brother takes her in. Her full-blooded brother takes her in. But that's the last we hear of her. She has no more speaking lines. She is not involved in history after this point. She lives as a single woman in her brother's house. So what do we think of? I mean, in a way, she used her agency to kind of choose this. In their culture, it was shameful for a woman not to get married and have kids, but I think that that is a very patriarchal understanding of the rest of her life. Why would this actually not be a bad thing necessarily to choose this version of a future?
I don't think she had much chance of getting a husband that would really be a good husband. I think she'd have to take up the dregs somewhere if she wanted to get married.
So
And I don't think that would be a good life either.
being single is better than being married to a bad man.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
And by being in her brother's house, it indicates that he provides for her.
Yeah.
Otherwise, as a single woman, nobody would have been providing for her. And
Mhm.
maybe she liked to read a lot. Maybe she had a craft that she enjoyed doing, and so
But she'd be the aunt that looks after the kids,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
which is what the unmarried women did
Yeah.
throughout history.
At least,
Do we know how she felt about nobody doing anything about it besides letting her live? David said, "Oh, no big deal," and then Absalom didn't do anything for 2 years. I mean, I don't quite understand why it was different in 2 years.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Gary, I didn't catch what you said though.
well, I'm just saying for the terrible things that she went through, at least she does have a good position in the royal family and a home and
Mhm.
all her family around. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
she's safe. Mhm.
she went through something extremely traumatic, probably something that she would need time to process. And so by outing this, she is able to find safe haven in her brother's house and kind of heal from this. Rather than pretending to be else like pretending nothing happened, keeping it down, keeping it bottled up, and not knowing when that trauma would rear its head and trying to then be married and then expect to perform wifely duties, it actually isn't a bad thing necessarily that she gets
Mhm.
quiet life. But that said, Sue, as you mentioned, Absalom takes about 2 years to avenge his sister. The assumption, I think, is not that nothing changed in 2 years. It's purely he was looking for an opportunity. He was sitting and buying his time. It says
Okay.
he wanted nothing to do with his older brother. He said nothing good nor bad towards him. He was just sitting back and waiting. And so he has this idea that he was going to throw a feast for the shearers of his sheep. So this is like the sheep version of harvest time. We just got a bunch of wool. We're going to go and we're going to have a big old party.
Wow. Yeah.
And the key part about this type of party is everyone gets royally drunk. Quite literally, royally drunk. He initially invites dad. Dad says no. And so he's like, hey, well, please. And he has to convince Dad the king to invite all the brothers over. So at least let the brothers all come and congregate. Kind of like he took notes from Daddy David here. He told his servants that when everyone's rip-roaring drunk, I want you all servants to come in and kill Absalom, or to kill Amnon. So Absalom's not going to do it directly, but once again, he is the puppeteer pulling the strings. And so they have the party. Absalom gives the signal. Servants come in, they kill Absalom, and then everything is in panic. The brothers flee because the two oldest brothers, one older brother just killed the other older brother in a way. And there's this scene where word gets back very quickly to David that, oh no, all your sons are dead. Because in the chaos, evidently, no one quite saw what happened, and there's a servant killing one, so they assumed all of them were killed. But about that time, all the others show up at the palace, and David's like, oh no. The rest of my sons are alive, but they mourn Amnon nonetheless. And it is said that at the beginning, David never punished Amnon because he loved him. And then after all of this, he loved Amnon, so they still mourned him. And I'm curious what you think of this whole scene of David's love and almost spoiling his children too much. But then this blood revenge that is taken. Yeah, Larry?
I was curious as to why the writer initially included that little vignette that the first news from the big party is all your sons are dead. You know, and then it gets narrowed down. No, it wasn't that bad. You know, the only one that we lost was Amnon. The other 19 are all just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is okay.
Oh, yeah.
Send worse news so when you get bad news, it feels better.
Yeah.
So do we think that David is a good father here?
Ask his wives whether he was a good husband.
He certainly wasn't very concerned about his daughter.
Yep.
He acts like his culture taught him.
Yeah.
He could, if he could do what he wanted.
Well, you know, and they don't, mostly in the text is women are not even counted. You just count the men.
Mm-hmm. So
They don't, yeah.
What do we think is going through Absalom's head? Do we think he cares for his sister? Do we think he cares for his family honor? Do you think he's the second in line and sees an opportunity? What do we think Absalom's motivations are here?
All of the above.
Right. He's trying to save his own skin. He's worried that there's going to be retribution for his killing of Amnon, you know. So he goes back to mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but rewinding just a little bit, what do we think his motivation, like we kind of have some of his motivation here of his avenge on Amnon, but if you all were to give him a more nuanced understanding of what's motivating him, what do you think his primary motivators are
for killing Amnon?
For killing Amnon, yeah.
Well,
the suggestion is it's not revenge.
Oh, it could be revenge, but revenge for
I
what?
think it's revenge.
Is it for revenge because you hurt my sister and I love my sister, therefore you're gonna die? Is it you shamed my family? I am now doing an honor killing because you shamed my honor?
I was thinking of an honor killing.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's more of a, well, now wait a minute. Amnon was first. I'm going to be second. If Amnon's out of the way, I will be.
Killing two birds with one stone, huh?
So using in a way using his sister's pain for his advancement.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So,
Would waiting maybe show that he doesn't want people to think it is revenge? By
possibly.
waiting a couple of
Couple of
years, because
years,
that
yeah,
all faded
yeah.
into the background, and maybe it will look like another reason.
Well, did other people even know?
Yeah, it's, so when you say revenge, perhaps it is, but will anyone have known that?
Yeah.
Well, it's known enough for the king to know. Because it
Yeah.
specifically says that the king doesn't punish him, it also implies that David also knows.
Yeah, okay.
The word has gotten around, at least a little bit.
Mhm.
And I think it would be noticed if the gorgeous princess is no longer in the palace. The gorgeous princess is no longer available for marriage. The gorgeous princess is now living destitute in her brother's house. People would notice that.
Mhm.
The other thing that I wonder though with Amnon is if having Tamar around just made that anger fester. If he wasn't initially out to kill his brother, but after 2 years of sitting on the anger, it just boiled until it was necrotic in a way, that it just took over and he decided to act on it.
And if Tamar's living in his house all that time, it's a constant reminder.
Yep,
Mhm.
exactly.
Mhm.
So first in line is eliminated because of his assault on Tamar and then Absalom's revenge. David mourns Amnon for a time, but afterwards, the final verse that we have for today, the king's heart went out yearning for Absalom, for now he was consoled over the death of Amnon. So he does love his second son, and his heart goes out to Absalom, who is now in hiding. So, with the last few minutes, what do you all make of this story?
Well, wasn't there in The Lion in the Winter, wasn't there a statement? Every family's got its kind of like it's good times and it's hard times. Ever. But
Some are worse than others.
uh,
Well, Chris, have you ever preached from this story, or have you ever heard a sermon preached on this story?
Mm.
Most people won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I mean, so part of this is a pastoral reason.
right.
I probably will never preach on it on a Sunday morning, if only because you never know what people are bringing into a sanctuary with them. And the
Right.
last thing I want to do is unexpectedly read a story about rape in the company of people who have experienced it.
Right.
And it is said that 1 in 3 women have. So, with that high of numbers, I am not willing to take that gamble and make someone feel unsafe and exposed and raw and having to deal with those emotions when they came in for worship. So, I definitely wouldn't just do it and not warn anyone. If people wanted me to preach on this, I would give ample warning just so people could prepare themselves. Which is why when we have talked about these texts of terror, I've given a heads up. Hey, next week this is going to be a hard one. Just so you know, we're about to read a text of terror because you never know who has experienced what. Not everyone is Tamar, who puts ashes on their head and is able to talk about it. And so I don't think pastorally I would ever just spring this on a congregation. And I've never heard anyone actually talk about it. So it is often reserved for studies like this where we can go into the nuance.
And here's an interesting question. I'm thinking that Presbyterian women would do a study with this story in it. But would Presbyterian men do a study with this story in it?
That is the thing that is always hard, is that the text of terror are often picked up specifically by female theologians and female historians. Women want to talk about this because it is the lived experience of women, and male theologians, male historians don't often deal with the text of terror because it is seen as a women's problem.
Yeah.
It's not seen as a men we need to change. Look at how bad we've been. The perspective I've always seen is coming out of women's writings about this.
Yeah.
Well, it's still going on. That's the other thing. So, I think somebody looked at the question of how many women are raped by their husbands. So it's different. It looks different, but it's.
Well, see, that's the thing that I remember. I see your hand, Larry. I'll get to you. I gotcha. A lot of people, when they talk about sexual assault, people have an image in their head about like someone being grabbed in a parking lot or out of a park at like when it's dark and at night, when the vast majority of them happen by intimate partners. It is more intimate partner violence, and women are far more in danger from the people they live with. And that is the hard reality. Sometimes it's not just husbands. Sometimes it is still brothers or fathers, stepfathers.
Yes.
Women are in danger typically in their own households, not in the park at night.
Yeah. I can't talk.
So, anyways, with that, Larry, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say from a male standpoint, it depends upon how much of the story you want to tell. Clearly there was never a more pious man than Jimmy Carter. And when he admitted that there was a time when he had lust in his heart. Every teenage boy gets horny, I mean, that's 100% true, but very few men, hopefully, attack women in the way that has been described.
Or admit that they feel that way, because he got in terrible trouble for doing that.
Just
yeah.
The human nature was condemned. Oh, you can't be.
So one of the things that I think is specifically something that men can do to help this, if I'm to put this plug out there, is when people make jokes about assault, don't laugh and say it's not funny. Because it is like when women call it out, it's like it is not seen as effective. It's like, oh, you're being sensitive. Oh, we're just joking. There's all these qualifications. But the way that you end a culture that has male entitlement on female bodies is men calling out other men of saying, that's not funny. Yes. I don't think that's funny. And you make them feel awkward. And that's intentional because you show that it is not acceptable to joke about these things.
I've never heard a man do that. But then the discussion about this doesn't come up very often.
Yeah.
Well, it's locker room talk.
Yeah.
And that's just it. It needs to be challenged by people in the locker room. And I think that's why this is very much a men's issue, is because men need to confront it with their peers. So with all of that, we are slightly over time. I will give you the one thing, I'll bring it all the way back around to the hook of why is this story in the book? It is because this chapter is actually a prelude to what we are going to read next week. It is the context of the rise of Absalom, and because Absalom is about to go through it, and if you remember what we read at the very beginning, there will be conflict in your house and these things are going to happen. The rest of that comes true next week. Absalom's story kind of goes through chapter 20. We're going to read the first part of it, and we're going to see what Absalom does from here. So, buckle up. It only gets worse. This is not going to be a fun couple of weeks.
goody.
I hope you know. All right, but with that, let's pray. Gracious and loving God, there are problems in this world, and some of them are not comfortable to talk about. It makes us feel awkward. It makes us feel like we would rather be talking about anything else. And yet, God, sometimes those are the ones that we know that we need to talk about. So God, give us the courage to enter into these conversations with love and with humility. Help us confront these issues like assault and like female agency and women's voices. For God, these are things that are in our ability to change. Help us call out when people are talking in a way that is truly unacceptable, especially by the rules of your love. Help us hold people accountable. Unlike King David holding Amnon accountable, help us hold accountability to the people who do commit these atrocities. Help us not just seek revenge, but justice. Help us give agency to the voices of those who have long been quieted and made to feel small and insignificant and destitute. And so by bring about love and acceptance and belonging in your world. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chris, for giving us this opportunity to talk about it.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
I appreciate you joining me in this space, because I know sometimes it feels like I got spiders under my skin because I don't want to talk about it, but it's important. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Take care.